when you are adapting a movie from source material like the iconic Tolkien books, the Lord of the Rings books, and even The Hobbit, obviously you can't have everything be exactly the same, right? So there's going to be some changes that are made when you're making a movie, right? And there were some changes during the filming that they decided to make to what they felt like, was better in the story. And just a few of those, just to clarify for our listeners, was the decision to have Boromir die at the end of Fellowship of the Ring instead of the beginning of the Two Towers, having Theoden be possessed by Saruman instead of just being depressed. An additional scene or subplot of Aragorn falling off a cliff to add more dramatic tension, and simultaneously rethink or recorporate scenes involving Arwen in a dream and flashback. Arwen's decision to leave Middle Earth was also a new thing. Elven warriors fighting at Helm's Deep, Treebeard's initial refusal to help fight against Isengard, Faramir's temptation to attain the ring from Frodo to prove his worth to his father, and leaving Shelob for the next movie. Did you know about some of these changes, and how do you feel about some of these changes they made?
I knew about some of them, not all of them. If I'm going to be honest, because I don't remember the books. I read them back in high school, which technically the movies had been out by that time. But I'd watched the movies. I believe I'd watched all but the third one first before I actually read them. Like one that I had forgotten about, but as soon as I read it, it made sense. Was like Theoden being depressed instead of possessed. And for movie purposes, it makes more sense that he was possessed than being depressed. Now, it could have been, in my opinion, a mixture of both because, hey, bad stuff's happening. This is not good. He's depressed, makes it easier to be corrupted or taken over. That makes sense. So it was almost like a both thing. Treebeard's reluctance and Faramir's wanting to take the ring initially. Those two I made that I knew about. And again, it felt like they made the movie flow better, in my opinion, for the sake of the audience and everything driving forward. Because they even say in an interview, it's like we were trying to keep this as true to the books as possible, while still being able to make a coherent, straightforward movie.
I agree with a lot of the changes that they made, actually. To me, reading some of the differences, because I haven't read the books, I'm planning on it. I'm going to, I just haven't gotten there. I've been busy reading and watching and doing other things, life, right? But
Life.
yes, but just reading about some of the differences and some of the changes they made, it's like, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. I agree with Peter Jackson in this instance, it makes sense to me because all these changes are coherent in this story and help this version of the story, like the movie version of the story. So to me, it worked perfectly. I thought all the changes worked really well, to be honest.
I 100% agree. I mean, the only one I might have pushed back a little bit was the kind of like the Arwen flashback scene a little bit potentially. I don't know if it was fully needed myself in the movies,
Fair, that's
but
true.
like first time I watched, I guess it was more so this like I guess you could play it off as like that flashback gave Aragon the push to get back up potentially, saved his life because like elven magic, he's alive now.
Yes,
I'm
he should have
assuming
died, but
that,
he's still here.
yeah, I'm thinking that was kind of the idea behind it for the movie's sake. Yeah, not an expert wasn't there, but that's kind of my thought. That was like I said, that was one like I don't think it was needed. I honestly think she did not necessarily need to be in the movie as much as she did because she's back home, not doing much.
Yeah, I agree with you. That might be one instance where it might not have been needed, but it didn't bother me. I guess
I'm being nitpicky with that if I'm being honest, but
Well, that's just it. We agree with all the changes, so we feel like we have to be nitpicky to balance it out, right?
fair. I mean, what I'm tanging like, well, like you said, it's a book adaptation, and they can't do everything. And this one, I felt like did the best out of the three movies because in the first movie, there's a huge character in the first movie that they cut out, and an actually really kind of interesting scene that kind of show that the dead are restless. That is not in the movie at all. That they cut out.
Even the extended edition.
Yep, not in them.
Wow.
The first one, like they cut out a character called Tom Bombadil, and he's basically a good version of Sauron, for lack of a better word. He basically has the powers of Sauron just granted to him by a different deity in that universe. He's just carefree and very much kind of like a fantasy hippie in a way. To not be mean, there's actually a scene where like Frodo's like, "Well, what if I give you the ring?" He takes the ring, puts it on, nothing happens, takes it off, and like tosses it to the side.
Huh.
The ring has no power over this guy. He's basically a demigod, just out in the middle of a field with his very free flowing elven wife.
Interesting. I'm really curious why they decided not to incorporate that.
I mean, it was more of like backlore stuff. I mean, they had to figure that to cut something that's probably not needed. And it also ties into there's a thing called I want to say it's the Vero rites, but I might be misremembering the name. But they kind of go through like an ancient burial where like the dead are kind of like rising up as like these weird ghoulish things, and Tom Bombadil actually helps save them from them, and that's how they run into him. And it's kind of like a flash of showing like, hey, the dead are restless. They're coming back up. Evil's rising. It was an easy, like, subtle way of showing that, in my opinion, or not so subtle, of showing that, and it wasn't in the movies.
Okay. Hmm.
Even in the third one, they cut out because the books are divided into two books. Technically, if we're being like weirdly picky about them.
Each book you're saying is you're saying
Like,
there's basically two parts in each book.
yes, because if you actually look at the Two Towers book, it's basically divided between Frodo and Sam get like one book in the Two Towers, and then the other one's divided for like everyone else's for the most part. It's actually divided in like these are happening concurrently, but you're reading about them separately to prevent you from jumping. So,
Interesting. Which way of it did you like better?
cinematically, it makes more sense the way they did it, where they blend it.
Where it
That
goes
makes it feel like
chronological,
they're going
basically.
to, yeah. For writing purposes, I do like how he did it. Like each one fits the way they did it, because I don't think it would have made very much sense to where like every other chapter they jump back and forth. It just breaks it up so. Especially the way people read. I mean, how often like you're reading a book, you'll get like midway through, or you just finish a chapter, bookmark it, you don't get back to it the next day. It might be a week before you get back to that book again. Then you have to like, what am I jumping to now? So it makes sense in my opinion how they did it for the books and how they did it in the movies. But like the third movie, they cut out an entire battle. They actually cut out an entire war. There's the war for the Shire because the Shire got taken over while they were gone.
Interesting.
And there's an entire like thing about that. I won't get into details about that because I could spend an hour on that. But they cut out an entire thing that would have added easily an hour to 2 hours to the movie.
Interesting.
Not even
Very,
joking with that.
very, very interesting.